Alright, so I just want to review constraints from a very basic level and how they work. They're very important with rigging, and if you're an animator, you really should be comfortable with how to use them when you start working with props, or if you had to fix a rig, or who knows what. So right now I have a cone, which I've renamed to master, and a cube, which I've named a follower. When you do constraints, you always select the controlling object first, which in this case would be the master, the cone, and the follower, or the follower will copy the master, depending on the kind of constraint you pick. So I'm in the rigging drop down up here on the top, and I'm going to go to constrain and click on the double bar to pull it off, just so I can quickly see all of these options all the time. So again, we pick the one we want to lead, the one that's going to control the other first, and then the follower second. And we're going to just go ahead and do a parent constraint first. Always check the options. In this case, usually you're going to want offset on for examples like this or the rigging, but there are instances when you'd want to have that off. Everything else is usually pretty standard, again, unless you want to really customize it. And they're pretty straightforward to understand. So we'll just start with the basics here. Maintain offset is on, hit add. Right away, I see all of this blue highlighting in my channel box for translate XYZ and rotate XYZ. That's actually not on the cone here. See, it's all plain. It's only on the follower. What this does is it tells me that when I click on this object has no control over its position or its rotation. The blue tells me that it's being controlled somewhere else. In this case, it's the cone. So when I move the cone up and down, the cube follows me. When I rotate, the cube maintains its distance but rotates as well. This is a very similar relationship between these objects, just like parenting, like parents and children in the outliner. When you parent one object to another, same thing would happen. When you rotate, the parent, the child will follow. Scale has no influence. You do see the distances changing. Again, that's just because of translate. That's not because of the scale is staying the same. If you notice, the size of the cube does not change. Okay. To break a constraint, all you gotta do is click on the text in the channel box that's highlighted blue, like this, and then right click and say break connection, and the constraint is gone. Alright, so a different one. We're going to, again, master first, follower second. We have point, options box, offset on, and add. This time only translate turn blue, again, only on the follower, not on the master. So what this tells me is that only position is controlled. So when I move the cone, the box will follow no matter where I go. But if I rotate, nothing will happen. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. Break this, again, by clicking on the text, right click, break connection. Alright, so again, cone, box, orient, offset is on, add. This time only rotate was highlighted, and rotate has a few different options. We'll get to in a second with orient and aim and the differences between them. But right now, if I go to move the cone, nothing will happen because only the rotate channels are being controlled. However, if I were to rotate this cone, the cube will rotate the exact same degree as me in the same axis. Okay, so I'm just going to step back and undo that. Again, select, break connection. Alright, then we have scale, which is pretty obvious. All it's going to do is scale the same instead of move. So I move, nothing, rotate, nothing, scale, and it will copy me. Okay, and you can add more than one constraint to an object. So if I wanted to do a scale constraint plus a point constraint, that is completely possible. The last one here is aim. So I'm going to grab the cone and the cube, go to aim, and offset's on. Again, rotate got highlighted just like orient, but the difference is that it's not tied to the rotation of this cone. So if I were to rotate this, the cube doesn't follow me, but if it was an orient, it would be. So that's the main difference. However, if I move, you see the cube always faces the same direction to look at the cone. So it's always going to aim at the object that's controlling it. Really useful for things like eye constraints when you're doing rigging. Okay, so go ahead and break that. break connection. Now the big difference, like why would we want to use these? If you look in your outliner, right now I have follower, which has a lot of constraints under it. When you do break it, it does leave behind the constraint node, which they're not doing anything, so they're not harming anyone, but just to stay clean and organized, it's good to remove those if you don't no longer need them. Back to this kind of parent. So if we were to just do a straightforward parent, and the big difference is that with parenting, not the constraint, but just parenting in general, you pick the child first, which in this case would be the cube, and the parent second, and hit P on your keyboard. What that does in your outliner is it puts the follower under the master, which is a good thing for a lot of situations. Rigging hierarchies are often a parent-child relationship, but sometimes having this system over here in the outliner is very important, especially in rigging. So you may not always want something to be underneath something else. So when I move this, see the cube will always move, it will always rotate. It's a very pure relationship. So if I wanted to kind of undo this and instead do, let's say, just an orient, what that's going to mean is that I can move without influencing the cube if I need to. But I can also rotate and it will copy me instead of the full relationship. So sometimes this is necessary. Sometimes it's also necessary because you want to keep it slightly different organization. So if follower was, let's say, in one group as, let's say it's a joint, for instance, and master, this is controls for animating, as if we're, whoops, put that in a group, as if we are, again, rigging and setting up our nice hierarchy over here. We don't want to parent the joints to these controls because then they would exit this group and enter the control group. So constraints allow us to make a relationship that maintains their distance in the outliner. So if I wanted that same parent-child relationship where it moves like me, it rotates like me, I would grab the master, the follower, and do a parent constraint. They'll have the same kind of follow me, move around with me thing happen, but if you notice, they're still separate in the outliner, which again is sometimes very important when you're rigging.